Hello and welcome to another episode of Chekpoint, the podcast highlighting and telling the stories of influential leaders in and around the sports industry. Today, we are excited to welcome our next guest, Brian McAfee, to the show. Brian is a data scientist for Nike from 9 to 5 and the co-founder of Walk-Off Analytics from 5 to 1. He has quite the decorated baseball resume, playing his college ball at Cornell and Duke University before he was selected by the Tampa Bay Rays in the 38th round of the 2016 draft. After a few years with the Rays and the Mariners, it was time for him to hang up his cleats and start his other professional career with Adidas, which ultimately led him to Nike. Brian is also passionate about innovation, analytics, and sports, which would explain why Walk-Off Analytics was created. Walk-Off is the first data-driven platform for lineup creation in college and baseball and softball, and is providing tools to baseball coaches that they've never seen before. Brian currently lives out in Portland, Oregon, but for the next 45 minutes, he's here with us on Chekpoint. Brian, my man, welcome to the show. How you doing this morning?
Appreciate it, Scott. I'm good. How are you doing?
Oh, man, we are excited to have you. For all you first-time listeners, this is going to be a really fun checkpoint. We're going to get to, take a sneak peek into Brian's journey and how he got here, what he's currently doing out there in Portland in the sports world, and, with all his acute knowledge, where he sees the game of baseball and sort of sports going as a whole. So, Brian, we got a ton to unpack today. Let's take a rewind. Really excited to get to know your journey. Where does it start, man? Let's dive into your childhood and bring us up to speed.
Yeah, man. I actually quit baseball when I was 5 to focus on soccer. I'm sure that was a hilarious conversation for my parents. It started out in Bothell, Washington, a little bit north of Seattle. Decided I wanted to play soccer. Decided the next year that I didn't like soccer as much and I wanted to come back and play baseball. And I think I threw a ball just about every single day from that point onwards until I retired. Started out there in Seattle, Bothell High School. Went out to Cornell. I kind of snuck by at every level. I was really late to get a scholarship to Cornell. Snuck by, had a medical red shirt, got my foot in the door at Duke, got my foot in the door with the MLB draft with about 20 minutes left. Barely made the cut to low A, and then they caught up to me, and game passed me by. So here I am today.
Man, it is so neat to get somebody on here that has taken that journey and use sports as the vehicle to, sort of pioneer what your life looks like. And so we can't gloss over the fact that you were an incredible pitcher. Really curious. Let's go back to Bethel High School and looking at Cornell. Obviously quite the jump from Washington out to Cornell. What was that decision process like? Why did you choose those guys? Sort of put us in the mind of Brian, going into college.
Yeah. I didn't have many offers in the first place. I really wanted to go to UW. I was a big Dogs fan. I'll bring it up in the podcast here. One of the former guests, Greg Moore, I threw a bullpen for him and he was like, "Hey man, I don't think you have, you don't quite have it right now." Awesome dude, shot it straight. And I got the same thing from other coaches at Gonzaga, a few other big schools. And, it was, a little bit of a reality check. And I was like, all right, I need to get better. I need to get my foot in the door somewhere that I can develop as a baseball player, develop academically. And I went to a showcase out in Oregon called Baseball Northwest. And there's a little bit of a miscommunication, almost lost my spot there. Like they told me I didn't need to try out, but then they, tried to deny the roster spot. And I was like, guys, I gotta come through. Like this is, end of the summer, junior year. Ended up getting one inning. It was the last inning of the game. And by that time I was kind of pissed off. I don't usually show too many emotions on the field. And I came out there and I was like, man, these guys paid a bunch of money for this showcase. I get one inning and, I must've been throwing a little bit harder than usual. And, Coach Marsh from Cornell was up in the stands and, saw me throw about 11 pitches and got a look, got a visit. And then, the rest is history.
Man, I can relate. So, being a punter and coming out,
Yeah.
I was recruited. I had some offers, but you start to get down to crunch time, and it's really funny. I was just telling this story that when I would show up to visit on paper, Brian, I told everyone I was 6'1", and I'd show up, I'm 5'8.5", and they're like, "All right, where's the rest of you, man?" So can totally relate. Going to those showcases, sort of coming down to the wire, which is how I landed at South Alabama. So, one of the things that through my journey, with that recruiting, where I think we have some similarities, is I developed that sort of underdog mentality where you're, like, I don't know why you guys are overlooking me, whether it's, for the stats on the paper or my height or whatever that is, but I know I can bring more to the table. Did you sort of feel that same thing as you were going through your career there, or what was that like?
Yeah, definitely. I got better progressively in each stage. So like senior year of high school, I did pretty well. Freshman year of college, I started doing well, but there was always that, that team above me or that pitcher above me. And I wouldn't say that I wasn't like an overly competitive pitcher. Like anyone that played with me would say that I was a kind of a nice guy on the field. It's not that I was like handing out cookies to batters, but I didn't like, I wasn't yelling on the mound or anything. But I was really competitive with myself. And I think that, it came down to, it was me versus them, but in my head, it was me versus me. And I always wanted to do better and be better. And there was always that, that next goal of make it into the minor leagues, or like making it on the business side, or getting that next opportunity. And I think I'll always have that, not necessarily a chip on my shoulder against other people, but against myself. Like I just want to keep improving, if that makes sense.
No, it makes a ton of sense. And I think that's going to, later in the conversation, we'll bridge that gap there, because, when you talk about walk off and building a company with, from a pure passion, it seemed like, to now something that is going customer facing. I think it takes that through line there, internally, to push yourself, especially after you're working a full-time job over there with Nike. But we'll get to that here, later in the conversation. I'm really curious, right? One of the things we talk about in correlations of sports and business is the ability to fail fast, fail forward. Being a pitcher, you are out there on the mound by yourself. What is that feeling like when, you get up there, you're all prepped, throw your first pitch or throw a couple pitches, and someone just goes yard on you? Walk me through that mentality, where how do you hit the reset button and go and, pitch again? And then how does that correlate into, how you sort of approach your professional career?
Yeah. It's funny. I'll give the next pitch mentality metaphor. I forget who it was, but someone told me, in your head, you give up a home run, you're closing out a game, and the leadoff hitter smokes a single up the middle. I'd always go back to the mound and clear the dirt off. And in my mind, clearing the dirt off was like, all right, like what's done is done. Let's move on to the next thing. And I mean, absolutely translates to the business world. You fail on a project, you fail on, whatever it is you're working on, you come up short in a presentation. And you've got to have that same mentality. I think it's a little bit almost more challenging on the business side, because, everyone preaches it in the athletic world. Your coaches they'll always tell you, hey, move on to the next pitch, move on to the next play. But it isn't talked about as much in the corporate world. And I think it's a mentality that helps athletes on that side for sure.
Yeah. And I think that's something that I always took for granted, being a punter. It was like, I always felt like there was a close connection with pitchers in baseball. All eyes are on you. And when you're doing your thing, man, there is no better feeling. But when you shank that pun, or when you give up a bomb, you're like,
right.
No, I want to crawl under the mound, So
you've got a lot of time into the next one too. It's not, it could be a couple drives later. It's lingering on your head in the sideline. Yeah.
Oh man, so much, right? So much is in this real estate. The 6 inches between our ears is so much more powerful than anything else we can do with our body. And so I'm going to use that to sort of bridge here, right? We talk a lot about mindset, mentality. more recently, we've been talking about the mental health side of things, right? And so being an athlete, obviously, we're able to go ahead and pour all our energy into one sport. And you took it to the top, man. You were right there at the MLB level. What was that transition like for you when, wrapping up with the Mariners and then looking to go to Adidas? What was, put us in the head of Brian through that period of life there?
Yeah, it's a really challenging moment in your life mentally. I've been toying around with the idea of retiring for a couple months there. Once you get, it's a weird feeling getting released from a team, and I don't want to say that I lost it at that point, but I was on the older side, and I was 25 at the time. And once you get released once, you kind of reevaluate your life and where you're at. And so it raises these questions of, hey, like what should I be doing? Like, I can either go back in baseball, I can fight my way back. Did I lose ground? Is it a lateral jump, or should I move to the next thing? And so I was evaluating that at that point in time. Ended up going to indie ball, getting signed by the Mariners, and through that journey over that summer, I think it was 3 or 4 months there, I kind of come to terms with the fact that was probably the end of my career there. My body was falling apart. I wasn't where I wasn't throwing as hard as I wanted to, and I had a fiance now at the time in Portland, and so been doing long distance for a while, and I think that was maybe one of the factors driving it. That it's a long road to the show. You've got to sacrifice a lot, and you've got to make the decision of, hey, what are my odds? Am I willing to take that risk and jump into it? And if you're not, and if you don't think, being real with yourself, that those odds are stacked in your favor, then you've got to be able to flip the switch and move on to the next thing. And that's a lot easier said than done. So when I wrapped up playing with the Mariners, I knew that I was going to flip the switch, and I'd started calling people at Adidas and Nike and trying to talk my way, get my foot in the door. And I was on vacation when I think it was Andy McKay called me. I was doing my best to get over it, and I hadn't told him that I was going to retire yet. And so I was in like New Zealand at the time, and I got a call from him, and it went to voicemail, and I heard it, and I called him back, and I was like, hey man, I'll make it an easy call for you. Totally understand. Hey, wish you all the best. Go M's. And I think at that point I'd gotten over the hump, but at the same time, you lose your identity. My whole life is every day was, hey, how can I get better at baseball? How can I get, I'm going to call it 0.01% better as a pitcher? What can I do here? And if you don't have something to transition that drive into, or if what you transition it into isn't as enjoyable as playing baseball, your days get longer, it gets challenging. And so I was looking for that passion. What can I pour my energy into to keep that same drive? Because I think baseball players, punters, football players, whoever it is, you get a lot of enjoyment out of the journey and out of the high upside opportunity. Going to the gym every day. You've got your goals and what you want to get good at, and when those get taken and pulled out from under you, it's hard to find the next thing. So it's a really challenging transition, and I'm glad that I was able to go through somewhat seamlessly, but it ain't easy for sure.
And I got to tell you, as we've gone through Chekpoint now, and obviously the 1,000-pound elephant in the room is COVID, and that's really bringing mental health to the forefront. But I've been really fascinated with what is really going on with these folks when you do reach the pinnacle of your sport. How do you transition that to something that get excited about, right? Because, this is what I dreamt about forever. And it turns out that, this is a real not a real problem, but this is something that most folks deal with in that transition phase. And I think you did a great job, or at least it seems like you did a great job of seamlessly transitioning that into Adidas, leveraging the degree that you got at Cornell, your master's degree at Duke. So I'm curious, did you always know that you wanted that next phase to be in sports, or was that by happen chance? Sort of now moving on from baseball, what was the rest of that journey like?
Yeah, I didn't know I was going to take a good job if I got it, no matter what industry it was in. And it just so happens that, Adidas and Nike are two sports companies out here in Portland. I'd always been high on the idea of working for Nike, just to be in an industry that I'm passionate about. But I think you got to do what you got to do to earn a living, and it doesn't necessarily have to be at that dream company. I think if you can find a way to appreciate the grind, appreciate, completing work, doing what it takes to do a good job. It doesn't necessarily matter if you're at, waste management or Nike, not to throw waste management under the table, but like, it doesn't matter what the end goal is. As long as you're doing your part to, contribute productively to society, and help your family out. It doesn't necessarily matter. It definitely helps being at Nike for me and being around a lot of awesome athletes and people. But you're at a company with a good culture. I think it doesn't necessarily matter as much what the product is.
Couldn't agree more. And, I just think it's really neat when we're able to take all the skill sets that we had on the field. And now, my mantra is reach one, teach one. And now you're in a company where you have reach out to young athletes in college, professional, all around the world, which is really, really exciting. And so, now that we're starting to get to know you, sort of how you ended up here at Nike, I want to take a dive in before we get to walk off. So being at Nike through COVID, I've been really excited to talk to you through this. What has that experience been like? And I just saw the stock prices. So you guys are doing something right. How has that been being an employee over the last 6 months there?
Yeah, it's so different. I guess we're doing something right. Inventory is looking pretty good, which is my ballpark. So it's a totally different feel. I'm kind of disconnected from the product. I work with the SKU numbers, the product IDs themselves. So I'm not like hands-on with, the cleats and shoes, whatever it is. I feel a little disconnected from the company and the brand, just sitting behind a computer and punching numbers and not being on campus. But I'll say once we're back on campus, it's the best campus in the world. It's so fun to be able to go out and play sand volleyball after work, go out and play flag football, water polo, whatever you want to do. Go to the gym. The gym out there is, you feel like you're an athlete. And I swear people in that gym that, just got out of a meeting work harder than most people I saw in the MLB weight room. Like there's a lot of really inspiring people, former Navy SEALs, CrossFit athletes, whatever it is. It's just a really good culture. And I'm definitely missing that being at home here. You don't get the same feel over Zoom, but they're doing an incredible job to, given the circumstances, make everyone feel like they're part of that same company that they started working for.
That's incredible. And when you look at some of the forward-facing stuff that Nike's doing, I just read an article that, they're looking into a chair where, it heats up and cools down and, starts to give you this, immersed experience. And I was like, man, where is Nike going?
Can we prototype on the employees at home here?
I was going to say, man, and feel free to hook up your podcast host as well. I will surely sign up for that one. But what's interesting, and because you run two ventures, right? So you do your Nike 9 to 5, and then I'm excited to take a dive into Walk Off. But with you not having to go to the campus, you might miss some of the cultural aspects, but do you feel like that's given you some more bandwidth and time to, grow your own venture as well? Or what is that, is that sort of been the silver lining for you there?
Yeah, definitely. It's, I'm glad Nike appreciates the side hustle, and I'm appreciative that I'm able to do both jobs. I'm pretty careful to keep one between 9 to 5 and not be, thumbing through tabs on my computer and switching between calls and filling up my calendar with calls during the day. But it's been nice to have the flexibility to not have the commute, to be able to, once I close the Nike laptop at 5 o'clock, I can jump over to the other one, maybe get a little workout in, get some food or something. But it's definitely saved me the commute time at the very least.
Sure. Yeah. And we're evolving, right? And it's so nice that we finally have the bandwidth to support these ventures of doing things digitally. I mean, I can speak for myself that, we haven't missed a beat. I miss people because I'm about as extroverted as they come. But other than that, it's sort of been, you just pick up, evolve, and figure out a new way to do it. So,
yeah,
really, really cool to see how you marry those two. And so, this portion will be more for the entrepreneurial folks to get some inspiration, because if you have an idea, man, you are living proof that, there is nothing getting in the way of it. So why don't you go ahead, give the listeners a little bit of insight as to where Walk Off was born, what you guys are doing, and sort of what the company is.
Yeah, absolutely. The original vision of Walk Off Analytics was me and my dad. I got to credit him with the entire idea, and this goes back like 5 years. He was a big dice baseball player. Loved just building little games and playing kind of like MLB Showdown-esque type card games. And he was like, "Hey, can we put this in a computer?" And he worked at Boeing for 42 years doing system simulations in their propulsion department. And so he was pretty well versed in that space. And I don't think he's missed a Mariners game over the past 10, 15 years either. So he's a big baseball fan. And he started working on this thing, and I thought he was a little bit crazy for a while there. I didn't really understand the complexity of what he's trying to do or the ins and outs of it. And about 3 years ago, like shortly after I retired, I was trying to teach myself a little bit better, get back up to speed with Python and computer programming. And I started playing around with the code, and I was like, "Hey, this is pretty cool." And I chatted with some people in front offices, and I was like, "Hey, what do you guys use for lineup optimization?" Because as this thing became more accurate and as we started kind of back testing it, I was like, "Hey, there's something here." And it wasn't really until about 2 years ago that I realized that there's a potential application at the college level. As the game starts to progress and technology trickles down and college coaches become more well-versed, they're starting to realize that their ability to get that competitive advantage comes from their ability to leverage technology. And so I got pretty excited about it. And this was about 2 years ago at this point. And I was like, "Hey, let's turn this into a business." So I get on Squarespace and I start making my website, and I'm way out in front of my skis. I'm like, this is so cool. It's going to be so easy. We're just going to do this and do that. And then boom, it's done. And I quickly realized everything in this space is way more challenging than you think it is. There's so many, you like to kind of downplay the hurdles that you're going to have to go over. And the biggest hurdle for us was building a web app around that simulation. So envision it as we have this model, and we can't just go give that to a head coach. They're just, even if you gave it to a data scientist, they're not going to know how to use it. And so we have to build an app around it that makes it really user friendly and saves data, and you can sell it and manage users. And then we also had this elephant in the room of how to get 50,000 simulated games to run in a reasonable amount of time and to not cost us a ton of money on a web server. So long-winded way of saying had an idea, got really fired up about it, and just chased it down through a bunch of hurdles, had to overcome a lot of big problems, and here we are today. We've been selling it for about a little over a month now. And so sometimes you have to look back and kind of appreciate like where you came from. Yeah, exactly. And kind of celebrate the success so far of just bringing something to the market. There's so many late nights where I was trying to fix a bug, trying to overcome something. And this point in time just seemed so far down the road. So I'm appreciative of where we're at today, but me being kind of competitive with myself, like I always want to get to the next thing and keep the ball rolling. So
I told you that mentality from high school was going to creep back up in the conversation, didn't I?
Exactly.
Man, that's incredible. And it takes one to know one in that space. And, me and my business partner, Chris, we're going through the same thing with Chek, right? And so it's, obviously the climate's a little bit, in sports it's a little different than we could have anticipated when launching a business, but nonetheless, it provides a lot of opportunity for growth. It provides a lot of opportunity to innovate, which I think the game of baseball needs to do in order to stay relevant. And so I was really curious, as you introduce such a forward-facing technology. We saw what Moneyball did to the game. Do you get some pushback around the traditionalists of baseball that say, hey, we want to keep the game and preserve it as it is? Or are you getting more people that are embracing what the future of the sport could look like?
Yeah, definitely. When you think about traditionalism in baseball, creating your lineup and writing down your lineup card is like one of the first things that comes to mind. It's like a ritual. You're writing the names down on the card, and it's there's definitely a number of coaches that look at it as taking the human aspect out of the game. The way we're phrasing that is, hey, it's an element of the game that hasn't had data to back it up at the college level for, as long as the game's been around. And the Seqnzr isn't meant to be the end all be all tool. Like you don't press a button and it gives you your lineup and you're held to that. It's meant as a tool that's going to augment your intuition as a coach and give you a little bit better feel for what you're rolling out there and what might be efficient and what isn't. And ultimately the decision still lies within your hands to given that new information to pick which one you want to go with. So, your data plus gut is better than gut. And it's not to say that it's taking that out of it. Your hitters still have to go out there and perform, but you want to put yourself in the best position to win ball games, and you don't want to leave runners on the bases, and you want to make the right decisions. And ultimately this is just going to give you that edge that helps you score a run 5 to 10% more of the time. It's not this miracle tool that's scoring you an extra run each game. It's just getting your hitters slightly better. And I'd like to think it takes some of the time out of that lineup creation process. And, you can look back on it and say, what if all you want, but if you know that you made the right decision based on the information you had, then it's easy to sleep at night. 1-run games become a little bit less regretful.
Things I don't miss, right? Those nail biters, and you're questioning yourself. Did we make the right call? Did we not? And I think that's, and it's a great use of sports technology, right? I think, a lot of times we think about sports tech, we think about betting, we think about video analytics and breakdown, we think about recruiting, but something that the coach can now bring into the clubhouse and like you said, fact check their gut and make sure that those two align, I think it's a really interesting, innovative way to start to shape the game. And so going to use that to go ahead and bridge into what the future of sports look like. Obviously, you're going to have your finger on the pulse here in baseball. We got some other things happening around leagues, such as name, image, and likeness. We have, obviously COVID breaking things up and a lot of shakeups. Working at Nike, any thoughts on where you see sport going over the next 3 to 5 years with the intersection of technology and sports?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'll try not to butcher the response here. everything is going digital. I think more athletes are specializing in one particular sport. There's more resources now available to them to be able to specialize, and they know what they need to do to get better. And as sports become more and more competitive, if you want to get a scholarship or go pro in a sport, it almost necessitates that specialization unless you're that much better, that much more genetically gifted. And so I think you're going to find it becomes more of a, I don't want to say more of a job early on in your life, but it has to be more of a focal point. And I think for better or worse, as sports get more and more serious, people are going to start playing younger and younger. And I hope that at the youth level, when you're on a 13U baseball team, a 13U football team, you can still find the joy in competing at it's like being able to treat that as that playground game where you're coming back to the classroom with like 400 yards rushing that day and still having that joy of competing without the pressure of, hey, I need to do this, I need to make this team. So I'm hoping that the future of sport is bright. We've got a lot of really talented athletes, but I hope that we can keep that that joy of playing still around.
I think you took the words out of my mouth. And, one of the things that I relish, even though, taking it to a high level in sport for myself was, man, playing 5 sports as a kid. I played hockey, I played soccer, I played football. And so I love that we're honing in and, getting more individualized, and we're able to, maximize people's potential. But at the end of the day, all the things that I took from sports were the foundation principles that really helped guide me in life. And so if we get too focused on the name, image, and likeness, or we get too focused on becoming such a good pitcher, how much are we missing out about the camaraderie of team sports where you're putting yourself outside your comfort zone and learning something new, or dealing with that coach that, hey, maybe you have some adversity, but you learn how to push through it. And so I couldn't agree more. It's really exciting. But I think the 180 to that is it's sort of scary, and we have to keep humanizing this technology and these advancements before we have robots out there playing that don't miss strike zones and all that fun stuff, But we'll save that for another conversation.
Exactly. For sure.
Well, this is really interesting. I got to tell you, Brian, your perspective into sport through your journey, I think has captivated the audience. I know it has for me. As we start to wind down here, I want to shift to something, a little more personal, right? So one of the questions we've been asking our guest, to share with us is, if you could tell our listeners one thing you've done in your life that you would recommend they do or experience in theirs, what would that be and why?
Great question.
Back-to-back great questions. Just earmark that for your host there.
That's all you got. Great questions. I would say I'm gonna give a couple answers and then tie it back to something. Don't get too stuck in your ways. Never stop learning, and find an activity or something in your life that you can either do on your own with friends that puts you in a flow state. Whether that's going to the gym, whether that's, getting into weightlifting, whether that's skiing, whether it's distance running, whatever it might be, something that can take your mind off the rest of your life, something that's challenging, something that pushes you and kind of keeps you sane. For me, I learned how to ski after I quit playing baseball, and I was a little reckless out there, and I kind of enjoyed it. Being able to, throw your body around and not have to worry about, not being able to make it to spring training the next year. And I was humbled by it. I was a total kook out there. I was crashing into stuff on the bunny hills my first day, and I was like, man, I kind of like this. But it was kind of an outlet for that competitive edge, and it was something I could always look forward to at the end of the week. Or midweek at the time. I was going to the mountain like 3 or 4 times a week. I was like, man, I got to get better at skiing. I got to learn this. I got to learn that. Having that outlet for that we're going to call it like a flow state activity that just locks you in, is, I think it's so healthy mentally. Something that allows you to, get outdoors, be healthy, do it with friends, whatever it is. Can't recommend that enough.
Especially with where we're at today, right? Like, I mean, we need an escape from reality, politics, sport. We just need sometimes just to be by ourselves and get in that Zen mode and just be one with who we are. And so I think that's great advice coming from you, and obviously listeners, Brian's doing it right. I mean, everybody has a different way of defining success, but, from the personal side to the professional side, this is one stand-up human. So I would listen to that with wide open ears. So Brian, to wrap things up here, with you guys, with Walk Off and Nike, if the listeners want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to find you on social websites? How can they reach you?
Yeah, shoot me a note, Brian at Seqnzr.com or LinkedIn. LinkedIn works great. More than happy to connect. I'm getting pretty busy these days, but I rarely turn down opportunities to network and connect. And there's been so many people over the course of my career that have helped me out and allowed me to get my foot in the door at Adidas or Nike, whatever it might be. I'm more than willing to return the favor and pay it forward. So don't hesitate to reach out.
And that's how we define success at Chek. It's you reach one, you teach one, and you've gotten to that plateau, my man, where you're able to get, come back downstream and start bringing people up with you. And, from Chek and Chekpoint, Brian, we thank you for everything you're doing for the sports community and coming on and just sharing your journey with us. This has been an absolute pleasure, man.
Appreciate you, Scott. Thanks, man.
Awesome. And for all you listeners, until next time, check yourself.